folks. Well, thank you for, I guess, breathing the, it's not, courtyard versus bank vault. It seems to just be hot and cold, which I guess is kind of funny considering that we always talk about blue-green deploys. Yeah, I'm Hunter Madison. I'm the cloud architect for Instana, an IBM recent acquisition. We're part of IBM. And I want to talk about managing Dropwizard with Teleport. Yeah, so a little bit of background. Instana, it is part of IBM. We're an observability platform. You can think of us, and marketing will not like this, but if you're familiar with Datadog, New Relic, tools like Grafana, Zipkin, Jaeger, etc., we offer a hosted version of that. So I'm just kind of want to run you through what's Instana and what's Dropwizard, because these are a couple of ecosystem-specific things, how we use it at Instana, and then specifically why I fought to bring Instana back in. And this is like company number 3 I've done this at, to have Teleport in play to give us the ability to go and help our security posture and help our management issues without making people upset and angry like you get with some of these more legacy security tools, I'd say. So yeah, Instana, really quickly. Observability monitoring platform, Jaeger, Zipkin, etc. Basically, we give you really nice user interfaces like this. This is our infrastructure overview from a sales account on top of a giant graph database that we keep for you. So we take all this data about your platform, we shove it into a graph database, tell you what happens out on the other side. Dropwizard, all right, bit of a whip. It is a Java-based web framework for making operations-friendly, high-performance RESTful web services. They're right about this being operations-friendly. I've worked at companies that have done Ruby on Rails, Python, Node.js, Go, etc. This is literally the nicest framework that I have used in terms of SRE friendliness. You can think of this as a Goldilocks approach, where you're taking the best in the Java ecosystem for doing these web applications, giving you the minimal amount of glue to make them work, and giving you something that's really easy for SREs to support. I mean, legitimately, if anyone here is an old Rails developer, if you remember Rails 2 to Rails 3, where you had to bring in bundler, yeah, never wanting to think about that again. Also, let's not talk about the managed interface in Dropwizard. Skipping over that one. But the idea behind Dropwizard, and this is what I love so much about it as a framework, is it has this concept of tasks. So for me, as an SRE and somebody who has to run these applications at scale, I can tell developers, okay, so you want me to truncate this database table if this condition happens. Well, how do I do that truncation? And what this turns into with Dropwizard, like some other frameworks, again, I'm using Rails as an example, I did a lot of Rails. Well, you can make a task in Dropwizard, and what this task will do, it's going to register a little HTTP interface. So you'll have 2 ports, your actual application port, your Dropwizard port. You can go onto that Dropwizard admin port and say, hey, run this database truncation task for me, please. You can also use this for other things like onboarding or offboarding customers, changing feature flags, whatever you want to. Just take some code in the context of your running application and run it, which is really great if you're a developer and want to get something done. But if you ever think of things in terms of security, compliance, auditing, just understanding what happened when the site goes down, this is a nightmare. It's crazy when you think about it that, oh, if you can get access to this one port, and it gives you a screenshot of everything you can do if you have access to that one port, you can just go crazy. And there's some key considerations that are missing, which, going back to F's talk, going back to, the wonderful start, it's who did what when? Where's the consideration? When are people doing these things? Why are they doing them? And then how do I find the thing from a logging perspective to an action perspective? How do you go and link the action to the downstream results of that action? If I say, I'm going to delete customer X, well, where's my system of record and where's my tracking on that? Who initiated that? So the reason why I'm talking about this in this specific nightmare is that Instana uses Dropwizard heavily. Like when I say heavily, I have X00 pods at time of writing. I'm not putting in a number for X because we're scaling up for the shopping season to make sure all of our shopping customers are ready to see what's going on. So if I have that many pods, and all of these pods can do all of these things, or various other things because service-oriented architecture, just saying, hey, open season, log in, play with this endpoint, that's not going to work. So this is where I love bringing in Teleport for these types of access issues, is because I have an easy interface to use. It's easy to write to, it's easy to operate. If I tell people I need a task to do it, it's in the Dropwizard documentation. You can get it taken care of relatively effectively using the services and the objects that's already in your Java application. And now I can bring Teleport on top of that administrative interface to say, OK, developers, you can have access to it, and I can see you have access to it, so we're covered. Using your application support, you have access to the HTTP endpoint securely wherever you are. And then using role access requests means that I can, by default, say, look, nobody has access to this, but if you need it, just ask. And I'll give it to you for 8 hours or 4 hours or however long you need it for. And essentially what we do is we have a specially configured teleport agent. It runs in the cluster to mediate this. Specifically, large quantities of applications attached to a teleport cluster causes problems. So if you have to do a ton, my suggestion would be get something like a proxy or Nginx running in front just to save yourself the pain of accidentally waking up to a broken cluster. And then at the other side, Teleport gives us the access control, the audit logging, and just a common way to tell people, hey, everything that you need to do your job is either in Teleport or you request the access you need through Teleport, and smooth over all the issues that you have from a more traditional solution. So I have a bit of a demo that I've just been kind of rushing towards, which I did as a video because I was told the wireless isn't going to be the best, but yeah, let's see how this plays out. All right, so to start this off, I have a demo Java application here. So this is using Dropwizard, CouchDB, GraphQL, all the fun developer tech stuff. And here we just have this task that I made which deletes records from the database. So the thing about this task is that it doesn't really have any concept of, oh, I might need to authenticate, or oh, hey, who's the person who's initiating this task. It's literally saying, hey, OK, just give me a list of all the customer ideas you want to delete, and I'll just delete them for you, which is really scary to have floating out in a system, especially the same system that you have your customer data in. So you want to kind of go through and wrap that. So the idea is, so the idea basically is that I'm going to I have Teleport and a background tab running on my local Mac to just do this quickly. But what I first want to do, I'm going to log into this example applications API, jump on the same port, and I'm using PAW for all of this. I'm going through and I'm making the request to go and say, hey, I have this problem. I'm going to go and basically run the query. So again, your standard GraphQL query, I'm getting this customer back. And this request, by virtue of going through Teleport, I have a record of it. I have headers. I have a JWT that I can get access to if I needed to view the actual user. I have all this extra audit information that's being passed to me from Teleport based off of a customer's, or my customer being an engineer in this case, is single sign-on session coming to me that I can start to take advantage of in the application if I need to increase or decrease the level of security and compliance that I have at play. It's a really handy thing when you think about it, because I've essentially gone and you're saying, OK, you don't need to care about authentication developer. You don't need to care about auditing developer. You don't need to care about any of these things, which takes time and resources away from working on your critical code path. I'm going to handle it through Teleport. So to continue on about this, I have this customer ID. I want to delete this thing. So I'm going to jump over to this other query that I have prepared, which is the delete customer query. And you can see right here, this is where I'm calling that task, that delete customer task I was just showing you, which and its default configuration, it's just port 8081 listening on localhost. Anyone who can get access to that server can go and make this action, which is crazy and is scary. And I keep stressing this because this is the one interface in Dropwizard where as a developer I love, but as an operations person and someone who is engaged in our security process internally, oh my gosh, I feel like other folks in the industry, hopefully everyone else feels me on this. It's this is kind of crazy. So basically, I'm going to stop this proxy session, I'm going to start a new one, and I'm going to switch it over to the admin. And again, all Teleport is doing is it's letting me log in, it's giving me this port. And now I'm basically going through, and here's the big bit. If you remember this ID, this is just CouchDB's administrative interface. I have a single record in this customer database right now. And this is just demonstrating, okay, well, I'm going to show you the records here. I'm going to run this delete command. And now the record's gone. So from a compliance standpoint and an audit standpoint, if this was an actual production scenario, you would see two things. You would see, if you had query logging turned on for CouchDB, that the application got this HTTP request to this endpoint. You're not going to necessarily know who or what made it, but you're going to see the request coming in if you don't have any other logging system in place. Something like, oh gosh, like a Palo Alto style or like a service mesh style thing to mirror and monitor your traffic. And if you have your database logs turned on, you're going to see a delete request come in and the record's going to be gone. Which again, this is a demo system, whatever, but you can do anything in this, and the more data and the more important you have for this data is did somebody just run an admin task by accident, and are our backups going to work? Do you even know that this task was run? Which I think is a bigger problem, especially when you consider that you will have not one thing that can run these tasks, but potentially thousands or hundreds of thousands of things. How do you understand, hey, this is going to be an issue? And I think, oh, snap. Thank you, Keynote. And this is where I think Teleport really saves us, is that if I go into Teleport, I can see I have my 2 user accounts, my administrators, et cetera, and when I start to take a look, we're going to have our applications. And this is what, again, I'm exposing from my laptop. I'm going into Teleport and saying, I would like Teleport to manage this example admin and this example API for me. I have my host names, but I'm talking to this local application securely through a tunnel that is encrypted and managed and maintained by Teleport. And the big thing about this that's really powerful, it's the fact that just by virtue of going through Teleport, I now have an audit log. So in this case, I don't, but in production, I take these logs and I shove them into a SIEM tool. So whenever there's a problem like this and I need to figure out, okay, what the heck happened at this point in time? Who was logging into the system? What were they trying to do? What things are at play that I will need to know from a security perspective? Like, do I have a malicious insider? Just from a training perspective, did somebody run something when they shouldn't have? Who did this? And I need to get with that person to try to unravel what's happened. Or just from a, hey, the system is now acting weirdly, were any of these admin tasks run? Well, I have this app session data event that when I start to take a look at the details, we can see, the application, for example, API, the application, for example, admin, I have timestamps. And I have these really rich events, which if you think of this in terms of an audit framework like SOC 2 or FedRAMP or ISO, well, I can tell you what happened, when did it happen, and I have all these extra identifiers that let me go and tie it back to that request from those request logs. So when these problems come up, I can go through and basically be like, oh yeah, developer X did this 20 minutes ago. We probably need to call them as we're trying to diagnose what's happening with production. And coming from systems where you have developers just logging into hosts directly and doing these tasks, Rails I think was the biggest, I would say, proponent / cause of developers getting a ton of prod access, where it's yeah, you're going to have a folder of rake tasks, SSH onto the server and run them. Rake being the Ruby version of like a command runner. We kind of need to, as an industry, start walking back from that, because letting everybody SSH and run whatever they want means that people can break whatever they want. And I mean, there's always chaos engineering, but generally the idea behind chaos engineering is that you control the chaos at some level. It's not just, we have hired every developer, you're now going to make sure that our operations teams are on your toes. So I think that this is just a really good example where you have these rich events, you have the audit log, you have the ability to link everything together. And you kind of get to this point where if you have good tools, specifically Teleport in this case, your compliance story is much simpler. When I'm audited, either internally or externally, and I have to talk about this, well, I can say, yes, well, I have Teleport. It rotates their keys every period. It's single sign-on with multi-factor enforced. Nothing's going to live longer than the retention time. And then everything that they do from SSH to database to applications, I can show you those logs and keep them for any arbitrary length of time that I need to. And when you think about this, and if you've never been through these audits, I highly suggest finding your security team and asking to sit in. It is an eye-opener in terms of understanding the things that you built as they're tested in a way that you've probably never seen before as a standard line engineer. When you have somebody go and fundamentally attack not just the decision process, but the company culture in a form to where it's like, okay, but sure, it might be great that you trust everybody, but how do you know that you trust everybody? Those types of weirdly existential questions that seem like a bad 5-year-old, just wanting to be really imperative and asking why. Well, that 5-year-old is actually an audit team that you've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to ask these questions to for a report at the end. And having these tools in place to give you this good compliance is really, really helpful, because everything that I've showed you, that 2-minute demo, it's the same demo that I'm going to do to any auditor that asks, well, how are you protecting this stuff? And then it's done. I no longer have to have this conversation. I've purchased a tool that gives me all this stuff for free. You can go read their public documentation. I've implemented this following their best practices. I'm covered. And this is huge when you have to do this for everything in your organization. And the other thing that I just want to point about this approach is I'm talking about Dropwizard, but there's tons of software out there in the world that's like this. PHPMyAdmin, which again, who runs it these days? Tons of people still do. AdMiner, same boat. You have these tools where the effect that they give is really, really nice. Hey, I can run an ad hoc database query, or hey, I can do a thing that is halfway between me having full access and me having no access and can't do my job. You can bring this in and help your team out whenever you have something that's less than stellar in terms of authentication, especially if you're willing to go after your VPN at the same time like I was. So, for a lot of the stuff in Instana now, you just go through Teleport, you're done. No more VPNs, no more certificates, no more having things break. Just, take the tool that you want to run and protect it, so that way I know that it's safe and secure and I have audit logs and you can still access it and do your job. We just have the two things split to where you give me half, which is the thing that you need to do your job, and I will give you the other half, which is what you need to protect it, so that way we can both do our jobs and not have the world catch on fire. So yeah, thank you for letting me speak, and if folks have questions, more than happy to take them.
Thank you, Hunter. Do we have any questions in the audience?
Hey, so it looks like Teleport really helps with the auditing and security posture, but as I've mentioned earlier, your end users and developers also have to love the product as well. How did the rollout of Teleport to your developers go?
So I've done this now 3 times at 3 different companies. I would say that this probably went the smoothest, in which most people realized how to log in. And the 2 biggest complaints that I had were, why is the Google button not first? And why is the Jenkins server giving me bad URLs back? Like, outside of that, and especially from the application perspective, it's really minor. You changed, one domain name to another domain name, updated a bookmark, and ran with it. I'll also say that in terms of trying to sell this, like, I have found that I have found that the teams that resist Teleport the most trying to bring it in are teams that need to do things heavily with direct sockets. So think DBA-style teams, situations where you need to use a remote environment instead of a local environment for development. That's where you really tend to get the resistance, because at least in this day and age, telling people, hey, I'm going to take away your VPN account, but you can just go to this web page to log into all your servers and apps. Like, that is miles ahead of trying to idle with Cisco AnyConnect or OpenVPN, or did you remember to sync your WireGuard key to every Bastion server that needs it? I sure as heck haven't. So I think it's one of these things where it's really important understanding culturally what your team views their needs for elevated and remote access are. But I would say, like, as time marches on, these approaches are being more and more prevalent. And then when you start to look at just the competitor landscape, Google and AWS offer the same thing in their console. In my opinion, less useful version at scale. But telling people, well, go here and click this button and you have your shell prompt, is now getting pretty common, and especially for newer devs who might have never used any of these legacy Cisco or legacy networking and access tools, and you're just 100% cloud native.
Awesome, thank you.
Any question?
Hey, have you done anything interesting with those audit events? Like when you exported them to SIEM, have you spotted any patterns or like maybe any alerts or any actions just outside of the auditors? Maybe something interesting from the security side that you could learn?
So I'm more than happy to talk to you outside, because this is a slightly big one. I'd say the most useful thing that I'm doing with Teleport that is generally applicable is the fact that I now know who is needing to log in at specific times to work on staging servers, which is really, really handy for when our staging environment is unhealthy. You can check the log and remediate that, which previously, when it was just, hey, we're using an LDAP server with PAM for an SSH key, that gets taken away from it. I will also say, and I did a talk about this with Teleport a couple of years ago, the other big thing that you can get out of the audit logs, especially if you're more of an SSH shop than necessarily a cube shop, turn on eBPF monitoring, feed that into your tool, and then you can basically have a report whenever somebody types a command, like, in our case it was Rails, so if you typed like rake anything related to the database, it would go immediately to PagerDuty for someone to look at, because if someone's like, yeah, I'm going to DB drop in production, you want to know about that as soon as they hit enter, because either hopefully you're on something like AWS Aurora, or you have an oops button, and if you don't, I really hope you test your backups.
Any other questions?
So, sorry, I sat in the back and I wear glasses, so I couldn't quite see some of the presentation, but I was curious on, so you made Dropwizard parts that had maybe like an add customer and a delete customer. I was curious if inside of Teleport, are you using the RBAC in there for roles to give people access to update and deny them, delete, or is it just for the authentication piece?
So what you can do if you wanted to roll this out at scale is that, so Teleport will allow, you can use Teleport as your allow list and your deny list to somebody getting access to that thing. And then I believe it's called dumper you can enable if you want to see all this really quickly. Basically, you'll get a JWT, which Teleport signs, that has your full user profile in it. So if you wanted to take that and build on it, you could basically say, okay, admin, your Teleport role is your administrative access. I'm going to take the roles from the single sign-on system that are passed to Teleport, take them from Teleport, and sign it with your JWT and trust that. So it's something that's totally possible to do. I just didn't do it in the context of the demo to try to keep it short and fit within time. But if you're okay with having Teleport be your SSO system for administrative tasks, perfectly fine thing to do. I've not run into any issues with it. Not saying that there aren't, but in many ways it is easier just having one place where you load your SAML key if you're a SAML shop versus multiple places. So really it's about the comfort of your development team, I'd say.
Yeah, thanks a lot. That was, again, sorry, I was back here and I was trying to see. But yeah, that's really, really great. And thanks for the explanation on the authentication and authorization that can go through that channel. Thanks.
Okay, I think that's it for time. So again, another round of applause, please, for Hunter.